Good evening, CSOMA community. Welcome to another Tuesday night webinar, second Tuesday of every month. We've been getting together since last September, and we're going to keep going indefinitely in this space, this shared time to come together and just really bask in the glory of this amazing medicine and learn from so many of our teachers and our colleagues and see our friends. So if you're tuning in, we love to know where you're coming in from. We have people international joining tonight, of course, because we have Dr. Dan Bensky with us. This is a really exciting night. I'm Ra Adcock, the Executive Director of CSOMA, and we have Dr. Julie Tran, our president and chair of the board. And we have Kim Newman. Anytime you're connecting with CSOMA, you're connecting with Kim. So we're bringing you this webinar tonight. Okay, let me think. There's been a lot going on legislatively, so I hope you're following along on Facebook and Instagram and on our newsletter. And if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, go do that. csomaonline.org. Sign up for the newsletter. It'll keep you up to date on all these amazing offerings like this webinar tonight. If you need CEUs for this, we ask you to make a donation. But if you're just here to be part of the community, that is awesome. That's why it's free and open to everyone. So the newsletter is how you stay in touch with what's going on and also know what's happening legislatively. So for California folks, it's been a hot season. We've had 4 bills that we've been working on. 2 we have been able to defeat, 2 that we are supporting, and 1 is being read tomorrow on the floor. These 2 bills that we're supporting are all based around Medi-Cal benefits. It's so important that acupuncture is part of the state healthcare system in California and is considered an essential health benefit. And whether you take Medi-Cal acupuncture benefits or not. There are limitations to being a provider in that, but it is so essential that this benefit is in our state healthcare system. We don't want to lose that. So we have 2 bills to try and support and embed those benefits into acupuncture medicine. And then we're also dealing with potential cuts in the state budget where these very benefits are perhaps on the chopping block. We've successfully defended it the last 2 years. We are defending it again this year. We need your help. We need you to write letters. We need you to weigh in on this. We give you details on Instagram, on Facebook, and through the newsletter. Things where you can click a button and email 12 different legislators all at the same time, right? Making the democratic process accessible and easy. And we all have to be involved in this. It's part of our medical ethics to advocate for access to our medicine. So please stay in touch with that. And thank you for everyone that has been participating. I know so many of you have been writing letters, calling your assembly people, your assembly members and senators. We're so appreciative. Okay, little plug for CSOMA. And just by the way, if you're not a CSOMA member, just look into the benefits. Membership really does pay for itself. And you're also doing your part to create support for the legislative and advocacy work that CSOMA does. And part of your membership also goes to the American Society of Acupuncturists, which is our national. So we take part of everyone's dues and send that forward so that we have national representation. It's the only way to be part of this legislative process. So thanks for joining. And for all of you that are members, thank you for your membership and your support. Let's get on with tonight's program. I'm going to turn it over to Kim Newman, so she's going to take care of all the admin details for what we need to know for tonight.
The fun stuff. Okay, before I do that, Ra, I just heard that Greg is in the audience, so we can actually bring him up and he can talk. So after I'm done, or you can look for him now.
I'll go get him now.
Okay, so I just have 2 things. One, the first thing is Dan's class notes. I'm putting in the chat the link. There, and that's to all of our public notes. So you can click on that, find Dan's. It's labeled accordingly. And the second thing is for CEUs, for those who purchased credits, this you should already have from registering, but this is the link for that. So those are the 2 main things I wanted to share. Yeah. And yeah, and the chat is working okay for everybody.
The chat is
Let's
working.
check.
And we just want to give 3 minutes for Con Herbs. They are a sponsor for tonight's webinar. I'm just not seeing Greg in the attendee audience. So, Kim, I
Okay.
don't know if you can help
Oh,
identify, have him raise his hand or something. I'm
I'm
just,
gonna have to look for him,
yeah,
actually. Um,
I'm not seeing Greg. Okay, you know what we're gonna do? We are gonna have some support from we want Greg Pepping, the CEO of Conherbs, to come and say hi. We're looking for him in the chat. In the meantime, we might have to do that in the midway point for him if we can't find him right now. So with that, I think that's what we're going to do is we'll just push Greg back into the first break. So at the first break, we'll hear from Con Herbs. And because I'm not seeing Dan in the, I mean, I'm not seeing Greg in the chat. And I think we should get on with the program. Okay. So we'll find Greg. So we're going to hear from Con Herbs in a minute. Okay. Let's get on with our program for tonight. So we have Dr. Dan Bensky here tonight, and I'll just share. I've been a fangirl forever. This is at a class. It was my first year in Chinese medicine school. This is like 2012, and I heard Dan Bensky was in our class with Dr. Bear. We were learning Taitian needles, and I turned to this really cool guy that's sitting next to me, and I thought this other guy was Dan Bensky. I turned to this cool guy who's really friendly and nice sitting next to me. I go, "Hey, I hear Dan Bensky's in the room." He goes, "Yeah, that's me." So it turned out I was sitting right next to Dan, and there we are. So I've been a fangirl for a long time. I can't believe we have Dan Bensky here tonight. Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm just going to say, if you guys have any technical issues, put it in the chat. If you have Q&A questions, like comments, deep comments to make, or questions for Dan, then put it in the Q&A part of this, and he's going to take questions as we go. With that, Dan, I think it's all you. I'm going to turn it over to you.
So,
Thanks for your patience
yeah,
while we got this going.
okay. Screen sharing is working. Okay.
It is working.
So, I want to thank Soma and Ra for inviting me to talk about palpation. This is something that's very important to me and hopefully interesting to you. I think what we'll do is we have kind of an introductory part about some background issues about palpation. And after that, we'll stop and do some question and answer then. And then the second part of the session, we'll be talking a little bit about a specific style of palpation-based acupuncture that I'm involved in called engaging vitality. And then we'll have questions again at the end. So again, just put your questions and then Ra will find you when we have a break. So uh, there we go. I'm obviously I'm author and teacher, so I have all those disclosures. So I want to start with some background issues because I think on the one hand, they put our medicine in kind of context, and perhaps more importantly, for this session, I will show you my biases and where I'm coming from, which will help you hopefully get more out of the other parts of the talk. The main thing I want to really emphasize to begin with is that the East Asian medicine, or team, which is a term I like to use, is at its core is a textual tradition. Certainly, elite medicine, the medicine that most of us have studied. And so it goes back, things have been excavated in the last 50, 60 years, around 2,500 years. And we know that getting text was the way that it was primarily transmitted. So also have to remember that over the centuries, literally hundreds of thousands of people have been dealing with this. And so that's part of the tradition. Really don't have an option to ignore it. And we realize also we see a lot of the original text through the lens of that tradition. And as the Chinese medicine or East Asian medicine has progressed over the millennia, the tradition has made lots of changes. And then there's also us. This is a photograph of Nie Huiming, who was my dissertation advisor at the China Academy of Traditional Chinese Medicine in the 2000s. And so the tradition is still alive. I'm going to get into this a little bit more. But I think all of these things are related to each other. And to me, to get the most out of them, we don't necessarily privilege one over the other. They're all important. And I think it's also important for us to remember that we're part of this tradition. We're not an important part, but we are part of it. And I'll get back to that a little bit more also later. When we start looking at how we diagnose, my friend Marguerite Dinkins showed me this quote by a lion tracker. And he said, I don't know where I'm going, but I know exactly how to get there. And I think this is the kind of toolbox we want to develop both for diagnosis and for treatment. Uh, it's a set of tools to get things. We need to have feedback so we can know whether we're on the track or off the track. And if we have a too strong a preconceived idea of where we're going, we will lose the track of what we're trying to find. So this has become kind of my mantra myself when I work. So we're talking about palpation. What does palpation mean? In English, it derives ultimately from the Latin palpabilis, excuse my pronunciation. That means to touch gently. It doesn't mean just to touch. And in Chinese, the word chujian means diagnosis by physical contact. So that means palpation is we're touching people as a way to get information about them. It's using our hands to receive information to enable us to better understand both locally and systemically what's going on. And I'm going to make a point that palpation is incredibly useful as a way to monitor the effects of treatment. And I think this is perhaps at least as important as helping us in the diagnosis. I'm going to repeat this a few times. When we deal with patients, whether we're talking to them or touching to them or even just looking at them, we need the right approach. We need to feel their state. And in general, we really don't get that much information from feeling their response to us. And I think, particularly with palpation, it's very important. And I'll again elaborate on this a bit later. But it's important to feel what's there rather than their response to us. There's too many unnecessary confounding factors if we do the latter. So maybe this group, I don't really need to go over it, but I'm going to spend just a few minutes about why should we practice traditional East Asian medicine. Most important reasons, of course, is helpful to patients. And our modalities are generally simple, they're inexpensive, they're often useful when conventional approaches are not. And also, I think quite important when people come to see us in general, and there may be exceptions, patients experience being treated as a human being versus just a bag of fluids and meat. And I think this is a really important thing. Of course, if any of you have ever had the opportunity to be a patient, this is a big deal. So we can't not treat people as humans, and that's very helpful to patients. But also, I think our practices are useful for us. Again, we are part of this tradition, and as we do it, we appreciate living humans and being part of a living tradition. I think that's a really useful thing for us. It develops the capacity for sustained attention, which is certainly endangered species in our present world. It enhances the ability for flexible thinking in a variety of situations. You have to be flexible to do our medicine. And it cultivates, like any medicine, a sense of responsibility for actions that transcend the self. Particularly, maybe in mainstream medicine, sometimes people can do something because it's the standard of care. And if the standard of care doesn't work, well, there's nothing to do about it. But one of the side benefits of really not having a standard of care in team is that we're responsible for what we do. And I think that sense of responsibility for what we do that affects other people, particularly people who are suffering, is a helpful thing for us. I was just talking to Rob before we started. She had a very busy day in clinic and she feels quite invigorated by the work. And I think that's a common side benefit to us for doing the work. If we're in the right mindset, seeing patients is invigorating and not tiring. I have a thing. I went to osteopathic school, and one thing I noticed that over the whatever 40 plus years since then, my colleagues or friends then who do mainstream medicine as a group, not all of them, kind of like people less as time has gone on. And the people who, and like us, we like people more as time goes on because we have to, forced to pay attention to them as human beings. So when I talk about palpation, I'm talking about it in the context of the team core concepts. And I want to go over them very briefly. These are personal things. And again, like I said in the beginning, maybe mostly sharing them so you'll know where I'm coming from. Team is a set of interrelated and overlapping systems. It's not a single system. We know that symptoms tell us neither where the problem is, nor where it's best to treat or how to treat it. We work with the body's own self-healing mechanisms. And team is a medicine that's based on experience. Again, all of these, some of them anyway, certainly the last one may be for better or for worse, but that's the way it is. So let me go over these just a little more detail. There is never, ever, ever only one way to do things in traditional East Asian medicine. And to me, this is a big feature. It's not a bug. We can look at things from primary channels, extraordinary vessels, Zangfu, six warps or stages, three burners, whatever you want. There's all sorts of different ways. And we know, again, based on text, that this idea of multiple perspectives goes back at least to the Western Han Dynasty. That's over 2,000 years. And so we can be very flexible. This allows us to view patients and their problems from multiple perspectives. So it means that we're less likely to kind of paint us and our patients into a corner because we can always like change our viewpoint and look at things from a different perspective. And of course, because there's never one way to do things, and because of the very ethos of East Asian medicine, we should never take one's perspective rigidly seen as the only correct one. That's just not what this medicine is about. We have to remember that the goal of diagnosis and treatment is to be helpful. It's not to be right. I think this is a big thing. It took, against my own personality, took me a while to really realize that. And so we don't want to, that comes into lots of different things, which I'll say, repeat a few times. That means when we're checking people and checking what happens when we treat people, we need to check that what we've done is helpful with the attitude that maybe we're not right. So we need to have a kind of critical look at our own work. And this understanding gives us great flexibility in finding useful approaches and treatments. And this is one of the aspects that keeps traditional East Asian medicine alive because there's always new things coming up. And in our own, not only in the profession as a whole in our country, throughout the world, but in your own individual practice. You just learn stuff every day. So another thing is symptoms are often not useful guides to treatment. My personal opinion is that when I mean helpful, is our goal is the alleviation of suffering, improvement of health, relief from symptoms. But we know as one of the core things about our medicine is that doesn't mean you treat something locally. In fact, well, in the 70s, when I was studying this stuff in Asia, if you wanted to really disrespect someone else's teacher, you would say that, oh, your teacher is one of those people, when the head hurts, they treat the head, and when the feet hurt, they treat the feet. And that was maybe the nastiest thing you could say about someone. So that's just part of our medicine. Even Western medicine has lots of symptoms that local treatment is not the way to go. So they don't tell you where to treat. And then if you have a kind of protocols or specific sets of points or maybe even formulas, they can be useful shortcuts at best, but more often they're unhelpful simplifications. And they become kind of tricks that you don't learn anything when they work and when they don't work. There's no fixed priority on treatment sequences because everything is interconnected. And again, I think one of the things that I have found out by doing the kind of palpation I do is I was trained, it would not be at all strange to treat facial pain or facial issues with a point in the knee or the foot. But I found that not rare to have knee pain or foot pain where the most responsive point is going to be found in the face. So everything is really interconnected. And when we have protocols, we shut things down. And that's really not good for patients or us in the long run. So there are no really fixed priorities. Everybody has their own biases, their own approach that works the best for them. And that's a good thing, but you can't be too rigid about it. And you can't confuse what seems to work best for you with what is true. I think our medicine, again, is about being helpful. It's not about being right. And therefore, on a certain level, it's not about the truth. It's about what you can do to help people. So, again, I think all of the medicine, particularly acupuncture, moxibustion, etc., is we are aiding the body's self-healing mechanisms. And because of that, I look at acupuncture as a call and response form of therapy. And the response is the treatment. Treatment isn't putting a needle in someone or burning mox over them or applying the teishin or whatever. The response, the treatment is their response. And so we need to be able to monitor that. If you don't have methods to evaluate your response, then treatment is like a wait and see game. You do something and the people come back, whatever, a few days, a few weeks later, and you see if it helps. But if you do have methods to evaluate the response of your treatment, the process becomes a back and forth, what my late friend Chip Chase used to call a dance. And you can continually check whether or not you're on the right track. And again, some people can see this, some people can talk to the patients. Palpation's not the only way to do this, but it's certainly a very useful way. And again, I think myself, it's a little arrogant to take some abstract view of what's going on and do some points based on that, and then have the person come back in a couple of weeks or days or whatever. Seems much more, makes much more sense to try to feel out if you're actually getting a response or not. And I'll mention just a little bit that because it's a call and response, if you give the body more stimulation that can handle, you get overtreatment. And you can get both unnecessary side effects. The person's tired, they're achy, they feel like they've had the flu, whatever. And I think often that decreases the efficacy of the treatment. So it's good to monitor whether or not you're overtreating people when you do acupuncture. Also, again, for better or for worse, it's based on experience. And so experience does not come from seeing patients. It comes from paying attention to when you see patients. And in my time, particularly when I was a student, I had unfortunately quite a bit of experience working with people who had seen patients for many years, but had not paid attention for most of that time. So you have to pay attention. And that is paying attention, I think, again, whether it's palpation, we'll talk about later, or visual, or doing the history, you have to start with appreciation before evaluation. You have to just appreciate what's there, and then later you can make some judgment about it if you probably have to at some point. That includes good interviewing skills. Don't keep asking people what you want them to say. It's not going to be helpful to understand what's going on with them. And of course, with skillful palpation, you want to just appreciate what you feel and then go from there. Gives you the ability to pay attention to what is going on in the patients themselves. And that's the goal. I mean, what their response, how their body responds to us poking them or touching them or telling a joke to them. That's maybe more about us than about them and not so useful. So responses to aggressive or careless questioning, palpation are definitely misleading. And so you have to be careful. One of the last things I want to talk about that I've gotten from not only myself teaching, but other friends of mine and colleagues who teach different kinds of physical type medicine to acupuncturists is that we need to remember the anatomy has always, always, always been important in East Asian medicine. The earliest texts contain significant amount of anatomical information and take some example, the amount of information on the length of the different viscera and receptacles and where they are and what happens if they're too high or too low is many, 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 many times more in the inner classic than the discussion about the psychic aspects of Hun, the paw, etc. So again, we're part of the tradition. We have to take it seriously, but we don't have to believe it all. Again, I don't believe that our medicine comes from a revelation. It comes from people working to try to figure stuff out. And that's why the original texts are important, the tradition is important, and we're important. It's always been important. And this idea about qi transformation, qi hua, which sometimes I think, again, I've had this experience, other colleagues have had this experience who are teaching people to actually touch the body, that sometimes acupuncturists have the sense of being too cool to touch, really touch and get into the structure because of this qi transformation. And this idea that East Asian medicine is primarily about qi transformation and not about the physical body is a mostly 20th century response to pressures, external pressures in the society from biomedicine. It was not an ancient priority. So if you talked about the liver and you had said to anybody who did any kind of Chinese medicine before, I don't know, 1875, 1900, when you say liver, do you mean this hunk of meat in your right upper quadrant? They say, of course. What else would we possibly be talking about? And so this is important that we should be able to really engage the body. And this gets us back to the tradition. And I think one of the important things for me, a way of thinking about this, comes from a guy named Yaroslav Pelikan, who was himself a believer in Orthodox Christianity, who was a professor of history at Yale. And I'm going to do a couple of his quotes. One is that tradition is the living faith of dead people, to which we must add our chapter while we have the gift of life. And he makes that in distinction to traditionalism, which is the dead faith of living people who fear that if one jot or title changes, the whole enterprise will collapse. So we have to remember this. Remember that people who not only do we have traditional lists inside our profession, but a lot of people who attack our profession looking at us as from a traditional, oh, that one thing is wrong, then the whole stuff is nonsense. And so in another interview, Pelikan said, tradition lives in conversation with the past while remembering where we are and when we are, and that it is up is we who have to decide. Traditionalism supposes that nothing should ever be done for the first time. So all that is needed to solve any problem is to arrive at the supposedly unanimous testimony of this homogenized tradition. And people who have this traditionalist view of traditional East Asian medicine have done the medicine a lot of harm because in that kind of desiccated, maybe we can even see dead approach. It just doesn't work. It doesn't. There's no room to grow, and it's not alive. And it needs to be alive. And they've had a way of talking about this in East Asia for many, many years, for hundreds of years, maybe over 1,000 years. And that is this shurgu or bunigu. So shurgu means to learn from the ancients, to take the ancients as our teachers, but bunigu, ni literally means mud. So don't get stuck in the mud with them. And that's just the way that we need to go. We have to respect them, but don't believe them as somehow they have revelation from the Yellow Emperor or something. Of course, like everybody, we know some of the stuff that we know is wrong. Of course, some of the stuff they thought they knew was also wrong. And this gets into one of the things, this is maybe not really uh, that pertinent to our talk today, but one of the things that always is a little odd to me is like sometimes people in our medicine will take a little piece of the text from one of the classics or some Tang Dynasty work and make a big deal out of it without looking at the context. And this gets back to the saying that a text with no context is just a pretext. I mean, it's just a way for you to buttress your own opinions that may or may not usually have nothing to do with the meaning of the actual text. So we see this in our world all the time in different religious groups, but sometimes we also see that in our medicine. So I want to talk about palpation and these core concepts. So palpation really helps you pay attention. If you are taking a history from someone and they're talking to you and you're not really paying attention to them, sometimes you can get away with it because the person's interested in their own story and they're not really caring too much about you. That does happen. But if you touch someone and you're not paying attention, it's very obvious. And so just the fact that if part of what you do on a patient is to touch them, that will help you learn to pay attention better. When you have different kinds of palpatory findings, you can select the appropriate team system or systems that is being manifested or is a one of the more useful ways to interact with that particular patient. And you can get lots of different access right away. So this gives us a easy way to get away from what I would call tunnel vision. So if you do any kind of palpation and someone comes in with a headache or pelvic pain or upset stomach or whatever, if you're doing palpation on them, almost the fact that whatever kind of palpation you do, you have to check out more than just the part of the body where the symptoms are, and that will get you out of that um, tunnel vision. And you'll see, oh, actually, there's nothing going on in their lower abdomen when they have constipation, but there's something going on in their upper burner. So it gives you a very direct sense. And again, you can do X-ray vessels, all sorts of different things. So you can decide where to treat, uh, depending on what I just said. And I think it's super important, and I want to really emphasize this again. And we're going to hopefully share one technique that you can start practicing this on your own. Is palpatory techniques give you access to how the body is changing in real time. And this gives you a chance to course correct as you go. And one of the things that happens to people when they get into palpation is that when they realize that by using palpation, that the treatment really isn't giving them the response that they're looking for, it becomes something that in its own way kind of feels good. I mean, like, oh, I'm paying attention. I'm not just going through the motions. And almost always, when you get that kind of feedback, the feedback helps you change your treatment during the treatment to get a better result. So it's not a sense of, oh, if you're doing everything conventionally, oh, I'm stupid or whatever. Here it's like, oh, the body didn't respond the way I was hoping. Oh, it's responding this way. That gives me information that I should do something else. And so that's a really important. Another thing I want to mention here, and this is something I'm not sure of, but I think it's true, is um, if you do a very good stimulation on a part of the body that doesn't require stimulation, it irritates the system and gives you side effects and decreases your treatment, even if you did the technique flawlessly. And so this is why knowing where to treat and where the problem is becomes very, very important. Um, and also, I have found that now everybody I know who does this is that when you learn palpation and you use it regularly with your patients, you actually feel like you're engaging with the tradition because it makes some of the concepts that we learn in school, which are honestly presented in a kind of abstract, maybe conventional manner, makes them much less abstract, makes them quite physical, and therefore your treatments are less based on convention. And one of the things that I have and many other people have is you have some part of the body, some aspect of the basic theory that you're unclear of, or there's different ways of looking at it. It's confusing. But if you use a kind of recursive learning approach with different kinds of palpation, over time, you get a pretty clear idea about what that concept means. And most of the time, when you do that, if you look into the tradition and read the tradition, you'll find that, oh, this thing that you thought you found out because you're so cool with palpation is something that someone 1,000 years ago or so wrote about in a actually clearer way than you understood. So I don't think palpation, this making things less abstract and making things like where palpable actually helps you engage with the tradition. So I think one of the last things I want to talk about before we get to the details, and we have some questions, hopefully, is there is this phenomenon called overtreatment. And it's not about the number of points that you needle, but the amount of how big responses you've gotten from the body and how much response that person's body can give without being overtaxed. And so, for example, if you do things where you do motor points or things like that, in my experience, you could do as many as you want, and that won't cause overtreatment. But if you're trying to get a systemic response from the body, um, you can easily overtreat people. There are clues, and some of them are just in our mainstream or conventional ways of doing East Asian medicine. One is that the tongue body will show teeth marks. So if you have a patient who has teeth marks or tongue scalloping, and you do acupuncture on them, as you do the acupuncture, if you recheck the tongue, you will find that most of the time when you've done a treatment that's going to be helpful for them, that those teeth marks decrease a lot or may even disappear. But if you keep treating them, they'll come back and be maybe even more severe than they were before. So that's a sign of overtreatment. Also, the pulse will become disorganized, and that means to me that you can't really describe it anymore. Maybe originally it was deficient or soft or wiry or whatever, and if you treat it too much and check the pulse, you can't really describe it because it's so non-laminar. It's really hard. So that's a sign that you've also overtreated them. In the engaging vitality stuff, which I'm going to talk about a little bit next, there's a specific finding we call the chi signal, which we're going to talk a little about the second half of tonight, is there's a layer. That layer will thin. So if you normally treat people, this chi signal layer will thicken, and it keeps getting thicker, but if you overtreat them, it will collapse. The yang rhythm, which is our term for the craniorhythmic impulse, uh, starts to feel as if it's taking place through a liquid that's become thicker. That originally you felt this motion through water, but now you're feeling it through oil or something like that. That's another sign that you've overtreated the person. And the other two things are kind of more specific to us, but I just put them here for completeness sake. We have a thing that Chip Chase developed called the shape of chi. You'll actually feel the body become hard. The shape of you become hard and push you away. And if you do channel listening, the channels will start to buzz. And again, we're not the only people who've done this. Wang Zhuyi used to have a thing he called channel confusion, which is very similar to this. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about or share before we go to questions is some approaches to palpation in traditional East Asian medicine that are fairly easy to find. One I mentioned before is called applied channel theory. It's developed by a fabulous physician, unfortunately, who passed away, named Wang Zhuyi in Beijing. And he has his students have an organization called Channel Palpation Org, and they teach all over the place. They have some really useful techniques. As most of you know, for a variety of reasons, Japan has developed more palpatory, placed more emphasis on palpation than most other places in East Asia. There's a traditional Japanese institute run by Mark. It's focused in New Jersey area, I believe, but they have classes. You can find them on their website. Probably some people here have studied with Kiko. She has her own stuff. Last month, uh, we had the opportunity to hear from Josh Margolis. He has classes, I think one coming up next month in California. You might want to check that out. And then we also have Engaging Vitality, which is a a set of a toolbox for palpation combined with East Asian medicine that I'm going to talk about next. So you can find that. I think it's all in your handout, I believe. And so before we do questions, this is a photograph by Monica Chase taken during the eruption on the Big Island of Hawaii. And the pink and black in the center of the picture is a lava flow. And you can see that depending on which way the wind was blowing during this lava flow, either the surrounding vegetation and houses were not particularly affected or they were destroyed. And I think this is a kind of a graphic that I like to keep in my head when we think about the different pathways and influences that go on in the human body. Okay, Ra, do we have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my thing. Is that what I should do?
I guess so. Just thinking about it. So I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A, but I bet some folks have questions. So if you do have a question, throw it into the Q&A. I know for me, I do a lot of acupressure because I work at a pediatric hospital and have long been a cranial sacral therapist. So I'm, of course, in love with osteopathic medicine as a practice. It's great to see you list out some of the things that I'm feeling. I don't think I've ever seen anyone else talk about it quite in this way, and how the quality of the chi can change from being kind of receptive and open to feeling like it's putting up a defensive shield. And just to see the way you list that out, I think it's things I've been experiencing, but wasn't necessarily taught this in that language before.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel also lots of people, well, they actually just get a sense. They're not actually, they don't need to have their hands on, but I've talked to lots of practitioners, like when they've done one too many needles, they can feel like the room changes and they
yeah.
know to take that last needle out.
I have a friend that's writing a paper right now on interoceptive awareness. So,
Uh-huh.
like when we have these feelings in our body and they're often too complex, we call it intuition, but it's really a lot of very complex data that we're taking in and kind of processing it in a more visceral way. It doesn't necessarily go through the same part of the brain, but we feel it, right? So
Right.
I'm fascinated by the idea of interoceptive awareness and how that plays into manual therapy. Um, Okay, great. So there's a question from Lucinda. Could you go back to the slide that shows all the signs of overtreatment? I'd be
I
happy to see
hope so.
that too. Yeah, yeah, we'll see, right? So, yeah,
How's
Lucinda,
that?
yeah, that's great. Lucinda, do you have any questions or comments on that? It's always fun. Remember, you guys, this Tuesday night is about us coming together as a community. So having this exchange of ideas and questions, it's really something we encourage. No question too small. And we love participation. So Lucinda, I'm wondering, did you have any other thoughts on overtreatment? And I'd be happy to put you on the spot and bring you up. Let's see. Here you are. Hey, Lucinda, I just gave you permission to talk. I'm just curious if you want, what about this slide brought you back to it? Is this something that you're experiencing or something that, you're just seeing it phrased? I know for me to see this phrased was really helpful. So what are your thoughts on this?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering about the one that says chi signal MTE layer will thin. I don't know what that means.
Okay, so there's no reason for you to know what that means.
Good.
That's what we're going to be talking about next. But it's
Okay.
just there's a thing people who have studied visceral with Burrell have learned the thing called manual thermal evaluation.
Oh, okay.
And we have we think that's actually not a very helpful way of looking at it, actually in general, particularly for people who do East Asian medicine. So we have reimagined it or reformulated it as a chi signal evaluation or chi signal assessment. And after the break, we're going to try and give people an opportunity to feel it.
Okay. Great.
Thanks, Lucinda. Hey, Shauna, I just invited you to come up too, I think. And Lucinda, I'm going to send you back into the audience. And Sean, I'm curious, you put a question into the chat, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share that with everyone. Way more fun to hear it from you.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so hi, Dr. Dan. I just
Hi.
have a question about this buzz that sometimes I and other classmates feel on patients, usually after treatment, but sometimes even before. But we can feel it by running our hands just along the skin, and there's just a vibration. And we've been wondering what that is, and I'm curious if that's a sign of overtreatment or something else. I'd love to hear your opinion.
I'm happy to share my opinion. Before I do, I want to make sure when we teach classes, we always say, don't take my word for anything, that
Hmm.
you can just give you an example. This is our experience. You may have a different thing. The buzz that you feel, I think you're feeling, there's probably two different things, maybe three. And maybe you and your classmates over time can figure out which one or ones jives with what you're feeling. One is when people who have very experience a lot of stress in their lives just lie down. There's a kind of, I don't know the right word, my friend Chip used to call it off gassing. There's just a kind of, they're letting go, their nervous system, their chi is getting just a little more relaxed. And sometimes you'll feel this kind of very superficial skin level, generalized, not more in one place or another, not following any channels, just a generalized kind of off gassing. And if you feel that, particularly if you feel it on your classmates, I would suggest if you're in a situation where you can, just do nothing. Just let them sit there for 5 or 10 minutes and come back and see if you still feel it. Because I think this off gassing is a transitory phenomena just from people who normally don't relax. And sometimes you have people who are, it's harder because they're uncomfortable when they're relaxed. There are people who are very vigilant and they're always on guard. And I know you'll might find this in your people you work with, Shana, that if they start to relax, they become uncomfortable. And so in the first few times you treat them, you can't get them to relax. You have to just do a little bit at a time. The goal of the first few treatments should just be to get them comfortable when they're relaxed. So I think if they just sit down and that's what you feel, that's probably what it is. When you do a treatment on people and you feel it, it's a different feeling because this off gassing is a kind of a generalized buzz. But if it's from over treatment, the buzz will have a kind of, I don't know what the word is, edge to it. It'll be hard. And again, you can find this again, particularly if you're working with your classmates, pay attention to it. If you check after every needle, and after one needle you feel this buzz with an edge to it, then just take that last needle out, and almost always that buzz will go away. Does that make sense? Does that have any connection to what you felt?
It does, yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, I usually feel it after treatment and yeah, I think that helps. I will keep observing. Yeah.
Yeah, particularly if there's just again, this is one of the tricky things about palpations here. You don't want to start looking for anything, right? You don't want to start looking, oh, is this hard? Because then your hand will get tight and you'll feel like it's hard. So I would maybe encourage you to think, oh, this wacky guy said maybe some odd stuff will happen. Let me see what it is. Just kind of play with it instead of look with it.
Yeah, love it. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Thanks so much. All right, I think we have time for we're at 7:55. And I see Bob has a few questions. Bob Quinn, I've brought Bob up. There's a few more in the Q&A. We also want to hear from Connerbs after the break. So Dan, I'll let you kind of think about the time and how much more program you have and how many questions you want to take now. We're thinking maybe a 5-minute bio break's the way to go for
Okay.
tonight,
Yeah,
unless
let's do another 5 minutes or so of questions and go
perfect.
from there.
And then we'll take a 5-minute break and then come
Yeah,
back. That sounds
yeah.
fantastic. So, Bob, you're up. Thanks so much for your questions.
Hi, Dan.
Oh,
Um,
don't you have anything better to do?
I always learn something every time I listen to you, and I've heard this lecture before, and I
Ah,
like it's like I've never heard it. It's just always so useful. This idea you expressed about doing something that's not specifically called for in a given treatment, that this leads to overstimulation. I was just thinking of, styles where they always start to do by doing something in the hara and it's not going to be specifically indicated for whatever the complaint of the day is. For instance, Yanagia Saurier always started at CV12 with a sort of a yin-yang regulatory technique. And you see Dr. Bear, who I know you're familiar with his 8 points of fundamental treatment. These are things that are not targeting the patient complaint, right? He hasn't gone through something like an EV assessment that you teach and decide that based on that assessment that the 8 points in the fundamental treatment are a good idea for a particular, he just does them automatically. So can you tease out that idea more for me so I understand better what you're saying?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think I can. You'll tell me if I can. So I think what you're talking about is what I would call background treatments.
Yes.
So again, so we have this thing that you talk about Bialben, we call manifestation and root. But lots of times in our medicine, what we call the root is a background treatment. It's just kind of addressing how the body in general is out of whack. I think that's the technical term, and doing something to kind of get it back in whack. And I think those kinds of treatments, unless the diagnosis of the root is very wrong, you never get this problem. And I think you can check them by looking at this stuff that if you think, I don't know, if you have a liver deficiency root, but the person's actually lung deficient, these things will happen. But if
Mhm.
it's this is part of the background, then usually you find those kinds of treatments make everything feel better. But the more common thing, the thing I was talking about is, oh, not that part, Quinn, but the opposite. Oh, I feel all this stuff, but the person has neck pain. So I have to put some needles in their neck, even if maybe the neck pain is coming from some channel disturbance or a liver problem or something, and it's really nothing particularly wrong with the neck. So then these BIAO treatments, these manifestation or what's the other word? Branch treatments that aren't necessary are done, then you get this
Uh,
negative effect.
uh-huh. Okay, I get
So I
your
think
point.
the background treatment, you only have, it's not this. If you pick the wrong one, then you'll find that, oh, it's wrong. But in general, it's treating the person systemically. That is the background to get them working better, right? I mean, that's what we think anyway.
Mhm.
But it's more like, oh, I'll give example like maybe you have someone who has shoulder pain, and whatever you come up with, you want to do some horror work, you want to work on their gallbladder channels, you want to work on their yang wei, whatever, and you think, oh shit, I didn't put any needles in their shoulder, right? I better put some needles in their shoulder. I think that's when you have a possibility of getting this kind of negative effect, regardless of how expertly you needle the shoulder. If those points are not necessary and not useful, then stimulating them, in my opinion, I'm not also, I'm afraid, partially my experience, will irritate them.
Right.
Is that clearer?
Yeah, that helps clarify. Um, the second question I typed in, thinking of, I won't name the acupuncturist, but a famous scalp acupuncturist, and feeling the pulse of a patient who came in before the treatment, repeatedly feeling it through the treatment. And the pulse is just getting absolutely worse and worse and worse. But the guy walks for the first time in 3 years. Um, Can you just comment on that? Because if I were that guy and my energy were off, appetite off, I'm not pooping well for 3 or 4 days after that, I'd consider that a good trade-off. So I'm just trying to fine tune my understanding would that be still, in your opinion, we should have not overtreated there?
My opinion, and this is definitely way on the opinion part of the spectrum, is this would mean that there could have been a better way to get the
Uh-huh.
same effect. So again, there's never only one way to do things. And so I think it's, again, was it worth it? Probably. Could the practitioner have done something that enabled the person to walk and didn't trash their system? Uh, that's a judgment call, but I think it's best to think, well, you should try and find another way.
Uh-huh. Yeah, my opinion runs the same way as
Yeah,
yours.
but I mean, it's that is the ideal. Uh, we're not ideal human, ideal creatures. We're just human beings, and so certainly wouldn't criticize the person for getting that kind of response. But I'm also interested. Something that I've seen. I don't know the situation where the person gets better temporarily and then gets worse,
Mhm.
and then that's sometimes happens in this kind of situation.
Yeah, and there's no way for me to follow
There's
up.
no way to know. Yeah. So,
Great.
Well, just a quick comment. Is there time or no?
this,
I think it's pretty much time. So maybe not another question, but a closing comment is okay.
I'll just say with the over-treatment I've experienced, I think 3 times in the last 5 years where there's still a lot of time left. I thought I hadn't turned the patient over, still patient face up. The pulse is just like, wow, I'm just really happy with that. And, the changes and the other EV findings. And then I think, well, I've got some time. I can probably get away with something gentle on the back. It might help the chief complaint. It's always a mistake. It's just, and I've just when they turn back over and I feel the pulse again, I just think, oh, are you still learning the same lesson again? It's just, so I just share that for the benefit of other people listening here.
yeah,
That,
me
Thanks.
too.
Thanks, Bob. All
Yes,
right.
Bob.
So I appreciate that. So great. It's really this sharing that makes this Tuesday night so special. Okay, with that, let's take a 5 minute break. So let's go until 8:08. It's 8:03 now. Come back at 8:08, everyone. Go grab a cup of tea and get back here for part two. See you in 5 minutes. Dan, there's a few other questions in the Q&A, and there was one in the chat or a comment in the chat. So, please feel free to take a break. And also, you could look through those and decide if and when you want to address those.
Okay.
Okay, great. All right, everyone. See you in a few. Hey, Greg, I'm here with you, and everyone will be back in about 2 minutes, but I just want to make sure you can share your screen. So glad you could join us. Well worth the wait. Much better to hear it from you than me. You're muted if you
You
weren't
would
done.
you would have done great, and thanks for being flexible.
Yeah, so glad you could join, and thank you
Yeah,
so much for hosting tonight's webinar.
you're welcome. Do you call us host or sponsor?
Sponsor, that's probably better
Okay.
terms.
Yeah.
Sponsor.
Okay.
Hi, Greg. You cleared customs.
I did. Yeah, I didn't break any rules that they know of, and it's good to. I'm actually back home. So
So Dan, meet Greg. Greg, meet Dan. If you guys haven't already met, and Dan, so we're just gonna, since we weren't able to do this at the beginning, we're just gonna, as soon as people get back, Greg's gonna take it just a couple minutes, and as the sponsor for tonight's webinar, share a few things about Conherbs, and then we'll get back to you, and he'll run straight through with you till the end.
Makes sense.
Okay, great. All right, one more minute, Greg, and we'll assume everyone's back.
okay.
I'm very interested in your October class. I'm excited about that because I live in Marin, so that
Okay.
would be amazing. So glad to learn about that. All right, everyone, welcome back. 8:08. We have so much going on tonight. Normally we take a 10-minute break, but tonight is just too juicy to give up 5 extra minutes. You can get that 5 minutes back at the end at 9 o'clock when we finish. Hey, so I know I was teasing you all earlier that we had Greg Pepping from Conherbs, CEO of Conherbs, and he's here now. So we're going to talk to Greg. We're going to turn over to Greg and hear a little bit from tonight's sponsor, Conherbs, a longtime supporter of CSOMA and all the legislative and advocacy and educational work that we do. Thank you so much, Greg. Thank you to everyone at Conherbs, Darren, and everyone else. So glad you could join us tonight. And I'm going to turn over to you for the next couple minutes so we can learn a little bit more about Con.
Thanks, Ra. Hi, everyone. I've been traveling back home from SFO after being in Canada with my family, so appreciate Ra and everyone's flexibility for letting me hop on here in the middle. I've been actually was listening to Dan's talk, so I'm sharing screen. I just wanted to show you a little bit about Con. Most of you know Con much longer than me. I've been the CEO for about 4 years, and you've probably known about the company much longer. We've been around since 1987. The website is conherb.com, and I wanted to show you, in case you're not trying to hide this thing. In case you're not aware that we have multiple different lines. The classical formulas that you would have learned, 104 of them, we have. And then we have a pet line. We actually have 3 new products, direct to consumer, that your patients can buy. And they're marked at a price to where they won't skip the clinic appointment. So that's an experiment we're running. We have a children's line. We have Ted Kapchuk's psycho-emotionally focused alterations on classical formulas in Con Herbals, and then we have a modular system and a fertility line and a mushroom and some singles. But I wanted to just point out a few things that many of you may or may not know about Con. We're pretty unique in that we make our own products. A lot of companies contract manufacture, and we're really proud that we make it under our own roof. So we have over 300 different formulas as you click through here. 300 different formulas, and we have them in tablet form and then in concentrated liquid extract form. And we like to point out that extract's not the same as a tincture. It's a different process. It's cooked, it's pressed. We add more herbs, and so we like to point out the strength of the concentrated liquid extract. That's our favorite form, and we also have tablets. The mushrooms are in tablet and capsule form rather. If you're on our website and you wanted to get some help with anything, you could book a consultation and you could fill out a form, and you can call or email us anytime, or you can fill out a form. And that's just a free consultation. We have licensed acupuncturists online to help you. We have a session tomorrow. If you come to the top, up at the top, that we have the second Wednesday of every month, we have office hours. And that's tomorrow. So you can come with you can send your questions in advance or just pop up. And we're trying to fit this in between patients in clinic. So it's 10:05 to 10:55. It's online second Wednesday of every month. I'm tracking my time and I wanted to keep it to 3 minutes. The other thing I'm going to do is drop a couple of links. Hopefully it doesn't distract from Dan's other talk, but I'll put that in chat. A matrix tool that we have for you to use in clinic, and then a fertility product line formula guide. So I'll put links to those in the chat, and call me anytime. You can find us online, and we really appreciate your partnership. We love CSOMA, and we were very excited when we talked to Ra and others at CSOMA. We wanted to sponsor Dan's talk tonight because we know he's so popular, and really wanted to be a part of this. So I'll turn it back to them. Thanks, everyone.
Greg, thanks so much for being here. Thank you to Conherbs. Go make an account if you haven't already and explore what's in there. There's incredible product lines. I know I just, at our last conference in May down in LA that we just had about a month ago, Conherbs was there. I picked up a few tinctures or extracts actually while I was there, and it was, I've been really enjoying them. And the veterinary line's amazing. That's something we need to talk about as a profession, is expanding more care in offering this medicine into animals. So really treating the whole family. So that's another topic for discussion, is animal acupuncture in California, but there's the herbal medicine right there already accessible and something you can add into your practice. Greg, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Dan, I'm going to turn it back to you, and we're going to run with you until 9 o'clock. And I'm here with you for any support.
Okay. So I think before I go back to the lecture and sharing my slides, there's a couple of the questions that I can answer. I think they're very good questions and I can answer them quickly. So one, and again, I apologize for mispronouncing anyone's name. My Lynn asked about the yang rhythm feeling like oil. Is it different than the pulse being stronger? And it's completely different. So basically, if you feel the yang rhythm or if you've done cranial, it's a sense, and this is an analogy, as if there's a expansion and a relaxation of energy or something between your hands. And what you want it to happen is that expansion and relaxation both become very smooth, feel like they require very little energy to happen. They're not being forced. And if you overtreat people, the thing that will change is not necessarily the symmetry of the yang rhythm, but it feels like before it was propagating through very thin fluid like water, and the fluid becomes thicker, more viscous. So it's maybe like oil or motor oil. When you really, really do it way, way too much, it feels like it's going through molasses. And so it might still be symmetrical, but it will be taking a lot more energy because the substance that it feels like it's going through becomes too thick. And normally the pulse does not become stronger when this happens. It becomes more, again, I mentioned before, more non-laminar, more confusing, more all over the place. So and related to that is Bethany's question. Uh, it's not about the number. She asked about some, she studied lots of different things, and sometimes she uses lots of needles or sometimes very few. So I'm interested to explore the difference with motor points or trigger points versus overtreatment. And my experience and our thoughts on this is that if you are doing points which do not have a systemic effect, so they're working on a particular muscle or a particular neurovascular bundle, perhaps, again, like a trigger point. Uh, I mean, the the experience is you can do lots of those points without any of the signs of overtreatment showing up. So again, it's not a philosophy, it's not a philosophical issue, it's a practical issue. And so if you do lots of certain kinds of points and they don't lead to overtreatment, then you're not overtreating the people. It's not a question of the number of points. But it sometimes, depends on the person. you can do one of those points. Maybe you're doing it just to relax a muscle, but that point you chose happens to have a more systemic effect, then you will get overtreatment. So again, it's not a, it makes sense. I mean, I hope that's clear. It's not, oh, you can only use 4 points or 6 points or whatever. It's you want to do as many points as you need to do by getting the maximum response from the body and without going into overtreatment. So that's my, hopefully that is clarifying this. And now I'm going to try and share again. Let me know if this works. Yes?
Not seeing your screen share.
Oh,
At
okay.
least I'm not. I don't think so. Yeah. So maybe try again. Maybe stop sharing and then share again.
Okay.
We'll get there. There we
Oh,
go.
there we
Yep.
go.
There we go.
Okay. So we're going to spend the rest of our time maybe talking 10, 15 minutes about engaging vitality. And then I want to, maybe I think we'll only have time to share one thing, which well, someone had a question about before, which was, uh, anyway, overture. So let's go. So engaging vitality is a set of palpatory and cognitive skills developed by Chip Chase, Marguerite Dinkins, and myself. Again, unfortunately, and I think tragically, Chip passed away about 8 years ago. But we're still going on, and it's really I'm going to talk about it very quickly, and then we'll just do one thing that it talks about. So it has its own premises. So part of it get into what I mentioned in the first hour. Proper treatment requires constant reevaluation. It's best to pay attention in order to avoid relying on conventions. And point location, I think this is maybe the easiest thing and the most useful thing of everything I'm going to say is point location is specified by the response of the body, not by some predetermined location. And again, we talk about the response of the body from our own perspective. But if maybe for you, the response of the body is the chi sensation, the needle sensation, then that's what you should use. The books don't tell you, they tell you general things, but they don't tell you specifically where the point is. We'd like to use multiple indicators to make evaluation more accurate. And I'm going to get a little ahead of myself. Uh, I think I noticed Josh mentioned this in the chat already. It's really a good idea to use different kinds of indicators to make your evaluation. What I mean like that is maybe you have someone with a shoulder pain, and we do the kind of more energetic, and again, I hate these words, I don't know better words, energetic, then we better make sure that when we recheck the person, we don't only recheck the energetic things we've checked, but we also recheck their range of motion. And so if you have different ways of doing things, particularly different kinds of things, things that are more structural, things that are less structural, the more of those things that improve with your treatment, the more confident you are that you are making improvement in in your patient's health. And again, the very last, maybe the last slide, or one of the last slides, will be a slide. It's in your handout. In October, Jay Sandweiss, who is an amazing teacher, and I will be doing a kind of a Friday evening and Saturday, Sunday class about engaging vitality, which will be mostly, we'll be doing some listening, and also this chi signal assessment, along with applied kinesiology applied to the acupuncture channels, which I think Jay is a master of in practice and in teaching. So they're very different kinds of approaches. And I think if you do both of them, you will get a better sense of whether what you're doing is really helping people. So that's why we like to use multiple indicators. So don't just use the pulse, and don't just use the tongue. We want as many things as possible, knowing that's very common that they don't all change. We know that in mainstream TCM, the pulse and the tongue don't always change in concert, but you're going to be more confident of your effectiveness if they do. And again, when you're engaging the body's own healing mechanisms, our premises is less is more. When you're dealing with trigger points or motor points, that may be a slightly different approach. But when you're getting to the really kind of basic, again, maybe more background, root healing mechanisms, again, it's not a philosophical point of view. It's our very clear experience over, in my case, whatever, 40, 50 years. Practicalities is we always have to put sensation before interpretation. This is very difficult for people to do. They want to say, I feel it's too hot, or I feel it's dense, or I feel this person feels like toxic sludge, or whatever. It's always a mistake. You always have to put just what you feel and try to remember it before you start to interpret it. Learning, and I think this is not only the EV techniques, but in general, learning comes about from focused, careful repetition, not from trying harder. Particularly with the things that we teach, in order to get the maximum information that's accurate, you have to be relaxed. Your hands have to be relaxed. If you try harder, it becomes harder to be relaxed. The other thing that's really important is palpation is most useful when we receive information that is not expected. And for example, for myself, I've done this for 30 years, no, 40 years. Particularly for first patients, I do the palpatory exam first before I know anything about them. And that makes that information more useful than if I talk to them first. So again, someone comes in and they tell you about their right shoulder pain. And when you do whatever exam you do, and you feel, oh, there's something wrong with their right shoulder, doesn't mean so much. But I think if you want to get good at any kind of palpation, I would encourage you to do it knowing as little as possible about your patient. And again, you want to have the mindset that you are ready to be surprised. I always tell the story in the 90s. I did clinic shifts. I supervised at our school, the Seattle Institute of, then it was Oriental Medicine, now it's East Asian Medicine. And I noticed that a very common thing would happen is when patients did the pulse of someone who was tired, uh, uh, didn't want to do anything, had a poor appetite, had loose stool, had a pasty complexion, had a swollen, pale tongue, that when they took their pulse, when they did the right-sided pulse, they would press so hard on the radial pulse that the patient's hand would go white because they were sure they had to have spleen deficiency. And so they made it up by pushing too hard. So the less, when you palpate, the less expectations you have, the better. And again, this idea that you're always palpating to test your diagnosis, not to confirm them. If you test to confirm them, your patients will not get better the way that they should. So always be ready to be wrong. Or again, to reframe that, always be ready to learn that what you've been doing isn't helpful, so you can be helpful. So the first thing we're going to do, may only have time to do one thing today. There's lots of people, so I don't think we'll be able to really check. So we'll just kind of go over it. Maybe, Ra, you can check the Q&A if people have questions about what they're feeling. I'll try to answer them.
Okay, great. I'll keep my eyes out in the chat and the Q&A. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, so this is something called manual thermal evaluation. And quite hilariously, I'm one of the translators of this book from the French, which is a story I don't want to go into, but it was fun. One of my main teachers is Jean-Pierre Barral, who was an unbelievably talented uh, practitioner and thinker, I think, about the body. Uh, we realized that, again, and I'll talk about my book at the very end. There's reasons why we don't use the word manual thermal evaluation, but it's basically the same technique. And so we believe there's like a chi signal layer. So it's not the chi coming off the body, it's a signal from the chi coming off the body. So it's not a sign of the person losing chi. And we can use this QSA to appreciate the overall activity of chi in the region of the body. We can use it for other things to help us find points, but I think today we'll kind of use it for that because I think this is something that is going to be relatively easy for you to practice, and you can use it as feedback during treatment. So what I like you to do, so there's going to be, everybody can see my hands, I hope. There's going to be somewhere between 1 and 2 parts of your palm that are more sensitive to this chi signal than other parts of your hand. So when we go through all of this kind of stuff, I want to emphasize from the beginning that we're not talking about this is right and every place else is wrong. We're saying this will make it easier to do this technique, and paying attention to other places will make it more difficult to do the technique. So one way, we're going to do 2 different ways. And again, we're just playing around. I wouldn't get uptight about being right. Just kind of see what you feel. You start your hands about 20 centimeters apart. You slowly bring your hands together, maybe with your eyes closed, and notice which area seems to light up first. So again, for me, the main thing I have is this area. When I'm here, I feel something here. I feel the rest of the palm when I get closer. But for me, the first place that lights up is this area right here on my hand. Again, it's very different. Everyone is different. Okay. The other way to do that is to very, very lightly drag the fingers of one hand over the palm of the other, like this. And note which areas are most sensitive to this light touch. And I get the same area. I get another area also. So what we're going to do for the next thing is just take that area. If you're unsure, just take a guess. Okay? And this is good. When we feel for the chi signal, we're not going to be paying attention to what we feel in our whole hand. We're going to be paying attention to what we feel in that one area. And I would say normally, can I use this anymore? It's about the size of a penny. You still remember what pennies were? Okay, so it's about the size of a penny. Okay? Does everybody have, again, we're just playing around to see what you feel. So then what we're going to do, the next thing that's really important, and I'm going to really emphasize this because this is one thing. So I've been teaching this material for 35 years, I guess, maybe longer. And this next thing seems to be the hardest for people to really remember. As we mentioned in the beginning, when we feel using palpation for people, for our patients, we want to feel what's there, not what's there in response to us. And so when you have your hand over someone, you want to be receiving from your hand and not emitting from your hand. Because if you emit from your hand, you're going to feel the patient's response to you. Fortunately, this is something that's very easy to calibrate. And most days when I start to work, and I'm going to use this technique, which I use every day I work, I will do this calibration myself. So again, I mentioned this already. So you have to keep your hand relaxed. You also have to be relaxed mentally. And so I think for most people, particularly in a situation like this, I would encourage you to have the mentality of just playing around. If what you feel isn't what's there, there's no harm. So just play around. If you play around a lot on many, many people, after a while, you'll start to say, oh, that's different. And that's how you learn the technique. Also, you inhale as you do the technique, helps you be in that mindset. Okay? So I'm going to give an example. Again, this is what I do myself when I calibrate every day, and we're going to see if we can feel something. Again, in this kind of group, just play around. Uh, and if you have specific questions, um, Ra will relay them to me. So you start about 30 centimeters or so above your forearm. The thing you want to do is have your hand as relaxed as possible, but the part of your hand that's the most sensitive has to be parallel to your arm. So for me, if my hand is completely relaxed, it doesn't work because this part is no longer parallel. So I have to open up my hand a little bit. We start about 30 centimeters and we just let our hand sink above our forearm, paying attention first to where do we feel some change. Might be a change in density is what I feel. Some people feel increased warmth. Some people feel some kind of resistance, but it feels like the top of a layer, the top of a membrane. If you come up a little bit, you don't feel it. If you go down too far, you don't feel the edge. So you want to get to just where the edge is. And at the same time, you're paying attention to what you feel in your sensing hand. You want to pay attention to what you feel on your forearm. Because if you're here and you're emitting, which if your hand is too tight, if you're thinking about what you're feeling, you will feel an increased warmth on your forearm underneath your hand. And you want to do that, just keep doing this until you can feel the edge or the membrane-like sensation in your sensing palm, but no warmth on your forearm. If after doing this a couple times it doesn't work on your arm, you can also try your leg. It's the same, you can feel it anywhere. Are there any questions with this?
I'm not,
Again, if
no
you're
questions yet in the chatter Q&A.
so if you are doing this and you feel heat in your forearm as your hand comes down, first make sure your hand is relaxed and your shoulders as relaxed as possible, and then try it again. This time I'm going to exaggerate. As your hand sinks, breathe in and imagine that this part of your hand you're paying attention to is like a microphone. It's picking stuff up. It's not a speaker, it's a microphone. It's like a vacuum as you breathe in and see where you feel a change. Okay? I have one more thing to check on this. It's very important that you have to be parallel to the body. You have to follow the contours of the body. If you, for example, if I'm trying to feel this, my forearm, but my hand is like this, or my forearm is like this, so it's at an angle, it doesn't work. So it appears that what we're feeling acts like a ray. And so if you want to feel it, you have to be parallel with the surface or for the ray to show up. Okay? You can do this again. This is just the same thing. So again, I think it's a little large group, but is there anybody who's like feeling something or anybody have like no idea what we're talking about?
While people are answering that, there is a question from Xiaodong that says, is this for protecting practitioners so we do not emit our energy away? Maybe if you could
No.
clarify of emitting versus receiving or palpating.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the main thing is that if you emit, then you will be picking up the reflection of what you emit bouncing back to you. I don't think it's like if you do this, we have not had the experience of someone doing this, emitting and becoming like tired or something. And the reason you don't want to do that is that, for example, we're not going to do it today, but one of the uses is you can scan and find, maybe I'll have a slide anyway, where a point is. And the point, there'll be a very thin, discrete spike of this chi signal coming out of the point. But let's say, for example, I'm doing this and I want to do something about the patient. They need large intestine 4. So I come over here, instead of just checking, I start emitting and very quickly, oh, it's hotter here. There's more chi signal here, but that's my own chi signal bouncing off to me and not what's coming from the patient. So it's really about accuracy of the finding versus protecting either person, as far as I know.
Couple other comments. Someone, I am, is saying, I feel pressure between my palm and forearm. Someone else
That,
said, Ned says, yeah, with inhalation, the forearm feels obviously warmer. And Bethany's saying that they're feeling the channel.
yeah, so there's all sorts of things to feel. So I think the thing I want you to try in your offices is very simple, part of a screen. And I think I want to do this. I think we have time to do this. Um, it will show us some ideas about how to do things. It will definitely show us if you overtreat people. This is another very easy sign to feel about overtreatment. And it can give you some really interesting ideas. And that is to compare the chi signal height over the three burners. Oops, that's the wrong place. There we go. So I think normally in a patient, you would be doing it with them supine, but maybe doing it on yourself. You could do it with yourself seated. You want to do this thing that we just did over the forearm, but over your trunk, where you're start about 30 centimeters above the body. Let your hand sink in, keeping your hand parallel. So remember the chest, the upper abdomen, and the lower abdomen, none of them are usually completely uh, straight in the frontal plane. They all have different angles. You have to pay attention to that. And you want to start keeping your hand parallel until you feel that change, which is the edge of the chief signal layer. So basically around CV17, around, you can't see CV12, and around CV4. And you will notice in most people that one of those burners, usually, again, people here are not patients, so it may be less, will feel like the when you feel the edge of the chi signal layer, it will be closer to the body, which we call thinner, in one of the layers versus the other. And again, if we had a chance, when we do exercise, we make sure you write things down. But here, just kind of get a sense. If you think, oh, I have middle burner deficiency while you're doing it, you are going to have a tendency to feel the middle burner over CV12 thinner. So it's really important to have no expectations, to just pay attention to the mechanics. Oh, my hand is relaxed. My hand is parallel to that body surface. As I sink in, I feel the change here. Here, my hand is relaxed. My shoulders relaxed. I'm parallel to the surface. My layers here, etc. Let's take a couple of minutes and do that. And again, as you can see, to do this, even when you're just learning to do it, it takes about 10 seconds to check these. And I think one reason I like to do this particular technique in this kind of situation is it was a very important a lesson for me. I started studying this in 86 and maybe 90, early 90s. I had a patient come to see me and maybe the third visit, I did this exam on them and I hadn't done it before. And the patient asked me why. And I remember I said something like, well, feel a little weird, waving my hand off the body. This seems a little strange. And the patient said to me, like versus the other stuff you do? And I realized, oh, whenever we think, oh, the patients won't like this, or they won't like these herbs, or it's too much trouble, or they're going to think it's weird waving our hands around them. It almost never has anything to do with the patients. It has to do with us, with our own mental hangups. And so this has been a very core thing I've done ever since. Okay, so how do we use it? How could you use this? And again, what I'm going to suggest you do is you just try this on every patient. Uh, it doesn't hurt them. Uh, Probably most of the time in the beginning, you won't feel any difference, but every so often you will. And when you do, you want to compare which of the three burners is the lowest. And the lower height suggests some restriction of function in that burner, a bouton, which I'll talk about in just a second. I want to emphasize a a thinner layer or a lower height does not necessarily equal deficiency. It just means some problem with the function. It can be an excess problem. It can be just a stuck problem. It can be a deficient problem. But the height doesn't tell you anything about that. It just tells you that there's something wrong. There's some problem in that burner. When you do something that's helpful, the chi signal border will increase in height. The chi signal will thicken immediately. And when you do something unhelpful or you overtreat them, it will collapse immediately. So this is something I do all the time as I'm working on people. I do something, I'm checking a bunch of things, but one of those things is checking um, the height of the chi signal in their trunk over these three burners. Okay. And then again, you can do things, I think yourself, I would suggest just play around with it. And when you feel some difference, I would maybe in the beginning not use that difference as part of your diagnosis, but recheck that difference as part of your evaluation of your treatment. And over time, you can do more things like that.
Hey, Dan, couple quick questions. Ron is asking, what is the difference in information from above the body with Baral type listening with hand in contact with the body? I'm not
Well,
sure.
normally when you have contact in the body, you have to pay very close attention to what layer your contact is. And I think for a screen to kind of see, is there something going on in this part of the body? The chi signal height is quicker and it's more general. So it's more of a screen. It won't tell you, oh, I need to do X or Y, but it tells you it's something to do in that layer. That's my uh, thought on that.
Great. One more question from Wendy. Is the chi signal related to the etheric energy that is emitted from the body?
I don't think so. I think when if you study with Burrell, when he talks about his manual thermal stuff, there are three different layers. What we call the chi signal is the one that's closest to the body, and there's two other layers that are farther out from the body. And I think one of those, as a guess, as a vaguely educated guess, has to do with that etheric energy.
Okay, that's it for questions right now. And a couple thank yous coming in from the crowd.
Okay, so I really encourage you. It just takes, really should take less than 10 seconds. If you're relaxed, if your hand is parallel, if you're doing your best not to emit, but just to receive, you can do it on everybody. And at the very worst, you will have wasted 10 seconds. And I know some of the people here are super busy practitioners, but probably, again, if you recheck, I guess that's 20 seconds. So I think if you do that over time, you'll start to get some very quick, useful information about your patients. So the last thing I want to talk about, we have, yeah, I mentioned this before, uh, burner is significantly lower. If your acupuncture is even vaguely helpful, it will increase almost immediately, etc. I just said this already. So maybe the last thing I'm going to talk about is this idea of tone, which is something that Chip and Marguerite and I have really gotten into maybe in the 90s. And it turned out that a bunch of other people from different vantage points were also getting into this idea in China, in Europe. So there must have been something in the air. So this word tong originally we means to penetrate, to pervade, to be holy, to be complete, to be homogeneous, to be uniform, and it's called to communicate, to have intercourse. So this idea of things being like that um, means and to extend. This is from a maybe first kind of dictionary in Chinese from almost 2,000 years ago. In medicine, it carries this meaning of openness, flow, and unobstructed physiologic activity. And as a verb, we think this is what acupuncture does. It doesn't tonify by itself. It doesn't reduce or drain by itself. What it does is to open things up. And then depending on what the person is doing and the points that you've chosen, then those are secondary effects. But this kind of connecting, communicating, tying things together is what acupuncture does. And I myself, I remember, again, this is for the people who do some osteopathic stuff. When you do osteopathy, there is this thing called the release phenomena, which can be either very localized or very generalized. And to me, there's in the osteopathic lingo, there's really not a good word for it. But again, maybe 30 years ago or so, I realized, oh, no, no, that's true. But in Chinese, there's a perfect word for this. And that word is tong, when everything feels homogeneous, connected, uniform, everywhere. And so I think this is a very important concept. And if you do stuff with engaging vitality, we talk about this all the time. So just think about it. To me, usually the word they talk about it in TCM is butong zatong. Without this tone, there's pain. But it's true, but it's a simplified and I think flattened rendering of a much richer concept. So we won't do the practice here. And this is in your handout. If you start to get more practice with the chi signal layer, once you are fairly confident with it, you can move on to this. So the last couple things I want to talk about before we have any questions is I think, again, Josh has mentioned this in the chat. Uh, Jay and I are going to do this kind of Friday evening, Saturday and Sunday class about this dance of diagnosis, utilizing tools for manual medicine. Jay will be talking about applied kinesiology, which again, I think he is incredibly qualified. He's also been doing it for like 40 years. And I will be sharing this QSA and maybe some forms of listening, which are also techniques that we've adapted from Jean-Pierre Barral. So if you're interested, there's still room, though I think we have a lot of registrants already, which is quite interesting. And then if you're interested in engaging vitality, I wrote a book with Chip uh, with the kind of mysterious name of Engaging Vitality. It's really, to be honest, I'm not sure it's for you as a group, it's that interesting. It was designed to support people who have taken Engaging Vitality courses. So it gives a lot more background. It goes into the different things in more detail. So I think you can decide yourself. It's about $40, $50. You can buy it from our website or it's also available on Amazon. So we're going to have questions. And before we get to the questions, I want to really give you a heartfelt thank to all of you for spending your Tuesday evening with me, trying to share some information, and to see Soma and Ray in particular for inviting me and giving me this platform. So if there's any questions.
Great. So we do have a couple questions. So another question from Ron. Do we use the same thermal technique to select the alive point to treat?
It is part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not the whole thing, but it is one way you can get to the area of the point.
Right. Yeah, so much opens up when we're listening. I teach, I work with in a pediatric hospital, so I teach a lot of families how to do acupressure with their kids, or even just containment holds, hand swaddles with their infants, coming in with that same, just waiting till you feel that resistance, and then just a little bit more, and just thinking about hands as ears. I even say, I think of them as my ears, and really I'm listening, and the doing
Excellent.
happens in the listening.
Right.
So I
And
love what
again, I think the Rob makes a really important point. When you are listening, you are not talking, right? If you're a good listener, you let the person you're listening to finish their sentences and talk. You don't interrupt them. And if you're going to use these palpatory techniques, this is, but you have to listen, have that same kind of receptive, active receptiveness, and not keep butting in with what you think is happening. Because just like if you were trying to talk to someone and you won't let them finish what they're saying, you're not going to hear what they're really trying to tell you. So I think that's another way that, and I just interrupted Ra to say that. So
No, no, not at all. Not at all. And my thoughts, my brain is just so excited because I work with a lot of nonverbal kids, kids on the spectrum or traumatic brain injury, or kids that are intubated and sedated. It's very common for that to be the status for kids in the hospital. And I've come to think of this kind of touch and palpation as not just manual therapy, but actually a form of translation, like we would call a Spanish interpreter to come and work with us. I
hmm.
realized that touch actually is it's language, and that so often I get the feedback. My parents like, I don't know, it feels like you're talking with my kids, and they're sedated. I can't even talk to them, but they're responding, and so touch really is. For me now, it's become beyond manual therapy. It's become it's its own language, like an interpreter, a Spanish, Russian, Arabic interpreter that I would call in to be part of the treatment. So
I
that
think palpation is a very direct conduit to what's going on in people. And then the names we put on, and this includes pulse diagnosis too, not just this kind of stuff. It's very direct. And I think, again, it makes it harder to look at things as abstract. And so you can learn a lot by this more direct, again, and relatively, not unbiased, but less biased than some of the other ways we interact with people.
yeah. Amazing. Um, okay, I think, oh, actually, there's one last question that I'm seeing in the Q&A from Mylan. So Mylan is asking, uh, especially when you were talking about just kind of coming down and not emitting, and that if you're feeling warmth on the receiving arm, I think this is when the question was logged. Even if you get close, like an inch away, can you still stay cool? Or,
Yes,
and are you just looking for changes?
you're just receiving. In general, to Mylan, to be completely clear, if you don't feel the chi signal layer until you're only an inch away, that area has a problem. Or sometimes you have people who have, like they're in shock or really debilitated. It's true everywhere. But normally it's about 10 inches off is normal. And so 2 or 3 inches is quite distressed. So it's very rare to only get, but you should be able to get an inch away and on your own forearm and not feel the heat from your hand or the chi from your hand. That takes, like all these things, that's not something you're going to do uh, in 5 minutes on a webinar, but it's something that you can train yourself.
Yeah. Kind of the opposite of Reiki, right? Where we're like turning that emitting energy on, I think, and so
Yeah,
this is
this
really
is
the
a
opposite,
diagnostic thing
right?
only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question that I'm seeing in the chat is Monica Chase. Everyone's in love with this photography you're posting and wondering how to find Monica's work and if it's for sale.
It's called Monica Chase Photography, I believe is the website, and it's all for sale.
Oh, and I think Josh just shared it, which is perfect. Great. Couple feedback. Diane's just saying, longtime cranial visceral practitioner. Me too. I love, I did visceral manipulation training in the late 90s under Baral's techniques. And so thank you for new ways of thinking about that work Diane is
Yes,
sharing. So
you're welcome. Thank you.
Dan, this is why you continue to be one of the goats of our medicine here. We know you for herbal medicine, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm a DO also, and I do all this amazing acupuncture and palpation manual therapy work. I cannot thank you enough for not only being here tonight, but just the depth of your contributions to this medicine. We have all learned from you, I think, in one way or the other, and here you are still continuing to teaching and expanding what our work can be. Thank you you so much for joining the CSOMA community tonight. I see all these gorgeous connections happening, people signing up for Khan's office hours, people learning about the classes that you and Jay and that Josh is also offering. Hopefully some folks signing up for CSOMA continue to join and expand this community. This is how we keep the vitality in our medicine and nourish it. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We will be here and the second Tuesday of every month of this year, and we're already planning our 27 program. So just mark it on your calendars and know this is the best thing happening on a Tuesday night. Tonight was especially fun. Dan, you broke records for our attendance, of course. So we'll have to figure out how to bring you back again. Folks, we're going to be in person in September in Northern California for an in-person CSOMA conference at the end of September. So do go to our website. We're getting registration up for that. So come on out, see Con Herbs in person. And Josh is going to be teaching at that, and Jenny Nieders, and Jamie Hampton is going to be doing dry needling and pelvic floor work. So really, we just have an incredible program set up to be live in person, touching, palpating, being together in community. Everyone, thank you so much for tonight. Dan, again, thanks again.
My pleasure. You guys take